Picture yourself tuning into a lively, nostalgic radio broadcast from decades past. A sweet, lilting voice cracks through the static and fills the air with warmth. There's something comforting in the gentle twang, an undercurrent of gospel reverence, and a quiet but resolute strength in every syllable she sings. That was the unmistakable presence of Kitty Wells. She wasn't flashy or loud in the way modern superstars might be. Instead, she worked her magic like a guiding light, illuminating a path for countless women who dreamed of leaving their mark on country music. They might have been overlooked or dismissed in a male-dominated industry, but thanks to Kitty, the door cracked open, just enough to invite them in. To understand just how monumental her role was, we need to rewind the clock, back to a time when the Grand Ole Opry was the pinnacle of stardom, when the phrase women in country music wasn't even a real category, and when a girl named Ellen Muriel Deason was born into a large, hard-working family in Nashville, Tennessee. She came into this world on August 30th, 1919. Picture Nashville in the late 1910s. The city was still emerging from its earlier days as a modest railway hub, soon to be a country music capital. Ellen's father, Charles Carey Deason, was a brakeman on the Tennessee Central Railroad. It's easy to imagine him coming home after long days on the rails, track dust on his boots, longing for some comfort in the form of good music. Her mother, Myrtle Deason, was a gospel singer who lifted her voice in church, as so many faithful Southerners did back then. Together they instilled a foundational love of music in Ellen. She was one of 6 children, part of a bustling household where the radio might hum in the background, and family jam sessions could break out at any moment. From an early age, she learned guitar, taught by her father's steady hands. Her dad and uncle were also musicians in their own right, so it was natural for this child to see guitar strings and microphone stands as part of everyday life. Not every family possessed such a deep musical heritage, but for Ellen, it was as commonplace as Sunday supper. By the mid-1930s, her sisters had also absorbed the music bug, and they formed a group called the Deason Sisters. In 1936, they started performing on a local Nashville radio station, probably not realizing that every broadcast was a little piece of history in the making. This was a moment in time when country radio was still forging its identity, and female performers were even scarcer than they are now. For Ellen and her sisters, the simple act of showing up to sing was already pioneering. There they were, a group of talented siblings, harmonizing in that tight, unmistakable style that only close relatives seemed to manage with ease. Somewhere during this whirlwind of local fame, Ellen, not yet out of her teens, crossed paths with Johnny Wright. Johnny was a cabinet maker at the time, which might not sound very glamorous, but he had music in his bones too. He was destined to become part of the duo Johnny and Jack, but that was all in the future. Right then, in 1937, he asked 18-year-old Ellen to marry him, and she said yes. Their union would last for a remarkable 74 years. In an industry often associated with short-lived marriages and broken hearts, those 7+ decades of partnership stand out as a quiet testament to loyalty, resilience, and a shared dream of making music. Shortly after tying the knot, Ellen found herself touring with her new husband and his sister Louise under the name Johnny Wright and the Harmony Girls. It was a humble touring setup, crammed vans, small venues, meager paychecks, but there was a sense of joy in it all. The seeds of something bigger were being planted. When Johnny later teamed up with Jack Anglin to form Johnny and Jack, Ellen would occasionally join in, providing backing vocals. In those days, she didn't get a marquee billing. She was simply part of the ensemble. But Johnny had an idea. He remembered a folk ballad titled Sweet Kitty Wells, performed by the Pickard family, and he suggested that Ellen adopt Kitty Wells as a stage name. Maybe he had a keen eye for branding, or maybe he just liked the sound of it. Either way, that decision would change the course of country music. As the 1940s got underway, Kitty Wells, still sometimes just Ellen to her closest friends and family, was trying to find her footing in the industry. She signed briefly with RCA Victor in 1949. The label took a chance on her, releasing singles like Death at the Bar and Don't Wait for the Last Minute to Pray. But these songs failed to gain traction in a market that wasn't exactly clamoring for female-led hits. She ended up dropped from RCA in 1950, a disappointment that might have spelled the end of a lesser artist's dreams. Instead, that near miss became the catalyst for a major turning point in her life. She considered stepping away from the spotlight altogether, focusing on domestic life with Johnny, but the universe had other plans. By 1952, Decca Records was making strategic moves, looking for a singer to record an answer song to Hank Thompson's The Wild Side of Life. That original tune carried a message that basically pinned the blame for infidelity on the so-called Honky Tonk angels, portraying women as temptresses leading men astray. Producer Paul Cohen extended an invitation to Kitty. Would she record a response? Although she was, by her own admission, on the verge of retiring, she agreed, largely because the pay was a flat union fee of $125, and that was nothing to sneeze at for a working musician with bills to pay. So she stepped into the studio and gave voice to It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels, an iconic track that turned the tables by suggesting that men bore responsibility for their own wayward behavior too. Upon hearing the final product, some radio stations balked. The Grand Ole Opry briefly banned it. NBC demanded that Kitty change one lyric from trustful wife to trusting wife. Such controversy, especially for a female artist, was almost unheard of. Yet ironically, that same controversy propelled the single up the charts until it became the first number one by a female solo artist in country music history. It also soared to number 27 on the Billboard Pop Chart, a crossover achievement that proved how universal that message of accountability was. The record sold over 800,000 copies in its initial release, a staggering figure for that era. Suddenly, Kitty Wells, who had been on the verge of hanging up her guitar, found herself at the forefront of a musical revolution. She was invited to the Grand Ole Opry, a milestone every country singer covets. And in that moment, whether she fully realized it or not, she became the defiant voice of women in a male-dominated genre. As the rest of the 1950s unfolded, Kitty rode that wave of success. She recorded Paying for That Backstreet Affair, a response to Webb Pierce's Backstreet Affair, which reached number 6 on the charts. She released Hey Joe and Cheatin's a Sin, both landing in the top 10 in 1953. That same year, she teamed up with Red Foley for a duet called One by One, which soared to number 1. That pairing with Red Foley proved so fruitful that they continued collaborating, laying down tracks that showcased how well their voices blended. Around 1954, her solo hits included Release Me, yes, the same song that many other artists would later turn into a standard, and Thou Shalt Not Steal, penned by a young Don Everly of the Everly Brothers fame. The deeper you go into Kitty's discography, the more you realize how she was quietly shaping country music's future, influencing artists who would eventually become legends in their own right. In 1956, she became the first female country singer to release an LP, Kitty Wells's Country Hit Parade. That might sound trivial in a world where albums are released by the truckload, but in those days, the album format was still emerging as a mainstream product, and certainly not everyone got the chance to put out a full-length record. So her 12-inch vinyl served as a beacon for aspiring female artists, a statement that there was a place for them in country music. It contained hits like Searching for Someone Like You, I Can't Stop Loving You, and Amigo's Guitar, which she co-wrote. The latter became a top 5 single in 1959 and eventually earned her a BMI award. During this time, she also collaborated with Webb Pierce, scoring a top 10 hit in 1957 called Oh So Many Years. In 1959, besides Amigo's Guitar, she released Mommy for a Day, another top 5 track that added to her growing roster of hits. Each success further cemented her nickname, the Queen of Country Music. While Kitty was breaking ground professionally, her personal life remained anchored by her marriage to Johnny Wright. They had 3 children, Ruby, Bobby, and Carol Sue. Each one inherited the musical gene to some degree. Carol Sue recorded How Far Is Heaven with her mother, a duet that peaked at number 1, 11. Ruby was part of the group Nita, Rita, and Ruby. Bobby recorded for Decca and ABC, carving out his own path in the industry. It wasn't just a marriage that spanned decades. It was a partnership built on mutual respect and artistic collaboration. Both Kitty and Johnny were longtime members of the Church of Christ, grounding their family life in faith and community. As the 1960s dawned, Kitty showed no signs of slowing down. In 1961, she scored her third and final number 1 hit with Heartbreak USA, followed by another top 10 single, Day into Night. Working with legendary producer Owen Bradley, one of the architects of the Nashville sound, she continued placing records high on the charts. Will Your Lawyer Talk to God, Unloved Wanted, and We Missed You, all in 1962, kept her presence strong on the radio. She maintained a near-constant presence in the top 10, an impressive feat at a time when other female artists found it nearly impossible to get major radio play. The mid-1960s saw the release of albums like Especially for You, which charted on the top country albums list. Her hits This White Circle on My Finger and Password both made the top 10 in 1964, showcasing her steady momentum. In 1965, meanwhile, Down at Joe's reached the top 10, though it would be her last single to climb that high. By 1966, she released It's All Over But the Crying, peaking at number 14, her final top 20 appearance. While some artists might have retreated at that point, Kitty kept going. In 1968, she released My Big Truck Drivin' Man, which became her last top 40 entry. She also cut a duet album with Johnny Wright, We'll Stick Together, underscoring once again how intertwined their lives and careers had become. Up until 1969, she continued to put out albums that made it onto the charts, such as Guilty Street. That same year, she became the first female country star to host a syndicated TV show, the Kitty Wells Johnny Wright Family Show. While it only lasted a year, it was still a bold move, showing that she had the kind of star power producers believed could anchor a television audience. In the 1970s, the landscape of country music shifted. New sounds came in, and the outlaw movement with artists like Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson started grabbing headlines. Kitty, however, remained loyal to the style she had nurtured for decades. Decca transformed into MCA, and she stayed with them until 1973, releasing multiple studio albums in the early part of that decade. The shift in label climates prompted her to sign with Capricorn Records in 1974, a label primarily known for southern rock acts like the Allman Brothers Band and the Marshall Tucker Band. There, she recorded Forever Young, backed by some of those southern rock musicians. That album received critical praise and opened her up to a younger crowd that might never have heard of her if they didn't grow up listening to the Grand Ole Opry. The union of Kitty Wells and a southern rock backing band seemed improbable on paper, but in practice, it proved her adaptability. She refused to be pigeonholed, showing that her sweet, measured style could mesh with new rhythms and a different audience. 2 years later, in 1976, she was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Think about that for a moment. The little girl, born Ellen Muriel Deason, in a working-class Nashville home, who'd once almost quit music altogether, was now enshrined among the greatest of the great. That recognition was more than just a personal accolade. It symbolized validation for every woman who had labored to be heard in a genre that often didn't want to listen. Kitty Wells was no longer just a singer. She was a living legend, a blueprint for women like Loretta Lynn, Dolly Parton, Tammy Wynette, and many more. Her willingness to push boundaries, to stand firm in the face of censorship, and to record controversial material opened doors for all who followed. The late 1970s saw Kitty and Johnny forming their own label, Rubaka, where they continued releasing music on their own terms. Even at age 60 in 1979, Kitty found her way back to the Billboard charts with I Thank You for the Roses, defying any notion that she should retire. For her, music wasn't just a phase, it was a lifetime pursuit. The 1980s and 1990s brought more intimate concert settings, smaller venues where fans could see her up close. Far from the big spotlight of earlier decades, these performances had a cozy charm. They served as a reminder that sometimes the truest beauty in music lies in genuine connection rather than massive productions. She also stayed connected to younger artists, bridging generational gaps. In 1987, she contributed to K.D. Lang's Honky Tonk Angels medley, which went on to earn a Grammy nomination in 1989. The 1990s saw her collaborating with Dolly Parton, Loretta Lynn, and Tammy Wynette on their album Honky Tonk Angels. Kitty joined them on the title track, creating a sort of four-queen supergroup moment that fans adored. In 1991, she received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Grammy Awards, a formal recognition of her immeasurable influence on popular music. Her family life stayed as rich as ever. She and Johnny opened the Family Country Junction Museum and Studio in 1983, eventually passing management to their grandson, John Sturdivant Jr., who operated the Junction Recording Studio. Kitty and Johnny performed their final show together on December 31, 2000, marking the end of an era in live performances. Even though the big tour stopped, her legacy was far from dormant. In 2002, she was ranked number 1, 15 on CMT's 40 Greatest Women of Country Music, a testament to her enduring reputation. The Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum in Nashville hosted a Kitty Wells exhibit in 2008 to 2009, ensuring that newer generations could learn about the woman who did so much to shape the genre's direction. And on May 14, 2008, It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels was added to the National Recording Registry at the Library of Congress, a distinction reserved for recordings deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. All the while, her personal story continued to add more chapters. She and Johnny celebrated their 70th wedding anniversary in 2007. In a heartwarming tribute to their younger selves, they went back to the courthouse in Franklin, Kentucky, where they had first tied the knot in 1937. It's rare enough for any couple to reach 70 years together, let alone in the unpredictable world of show business. But that was Kitty, steadfast, loyal, and built for the long haul. When Johnny passed away in 2011, Kitty, by then well into her 90s, lost a partner she had walked beside for almost her entire life. On July 16, 2012, Kitty Wells herself departed this world from complications following a stroke. She was 92. While her physical presence may have faded, her spirit lives on through every female artist who steps onto a stage with a steel guitar behind her, ready to sing a story that challenges the status quo. She is buried at Spring Hill Cemetery in Nashville, Tennessee, bringing her life full circle in the city where she was born, but you can still feel her echo in the corridors of the Grand Ole Opry, in the dusty grooves of her vinyl records, and in the warm memory of fans who remember how she broke through barriers with a calm determination. In the end, Kitty Wells's story is about possibility. She was born into a time that didn't exactly roll out the red carpet for female country singers, yet she stormed past those barriers, albeit with a quiet grace that might have led some to underestimate her. She lived to the age of 92, passing away in the city where it all started, having witnessed nearly a full century of change in both the world at large and the music industry specifically. But she was never left behind by those changes. Instead, she shaped them, whether she intended to or not. So if you ever find yourself scrolling through old records or curated playlists and stumble upon the name Kitty Wells, pause for a moment. Give a listen to It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels, or any number of her hits. Let the gentle instrumentation transport you back to smoky dance halls and old-time radio broadcasts. Try to imagine how radical it must have sounded in 1952 for a woman to say, wait a minute, let's rethink who's really at fault here. Then consider all the female artists who came after her, each building on that foundation. And as you listen, you might just feel an odd sense of warmth, like the flicker of a candle that, even after it's been blown out, lingers in the air. That's Kitty Wells for you. A steady glow in the annals of country music, illuminating the path for those who dare to follow.